For years, there was one rule that defined success in business: grow. Grow fast, grow aggressively, grow at all costs. If a company was expanding, adding customers, entering new markets, increasing revenue, it was winning. Profit could wait. As long as growth was strong, everything else was secondary. But that rule is being rewritten. Right now, a new reality is taking hold across the business world. Growth is optional, profit isn't. And that shift is changing how companies operate at every level. To understand why this is happening, you have to look at what fueled the old model. For a long time, growth was cheap, capital was easy to access, interest rates were low, investors were willing to fund expansion even if companies weren't profitable. The belief was simple: scale first, figure out profits later. That created an environment where businesses were encouraged to spend, hire more people, launch more products, enter more markets, acquire more customers, even if it meant losing money in the short term. Because the expectation was that once a company reached enough scale, profitability would follow. And for some companies it did, but for many it didn't. And now the conditions that supported that strategy have changed. Money is no longer cheap. Higher interest rates have made borrowing more expensive. Investors are more cautious. Funding is harder to secure. That means companies can't rely on external capital to sustain losses. They have to generate their own. And that brings profit back to the center of the conversation. At the same time, costs have increased, labor is more expensive, supply chains are more complex, operating expenses are higher across the board. This creates pressure on margins. And when margins are under pressure, growth alone isn't enough. You can grow revenue and still lose money. So companies are being forced to ask a different question: not how fast are we growing, but are we actually making money? And that question is changing everything. One of the biggest shifts is in how companies define success. In the past, a company could report strong revenue growth and be seen as thriving, even if it was unprofitable. Today, that's no longer enough. Investors, executives, and even employees are paying closer attention to profitability. They want to see sustainable business models that can generate cash, not just consume it. And that's raising the bar. Another major change is in how companies allocate resources. When growth was the priority, spending was often aggressive, marketing budgets were large, hiring was rapid, expansion plans were ambitious. Now that approach is being reevaluated. Companies are becoming more selective. They're asking, where does this investment actually generate a return? If something doesn't contribute to profitability, it's being cut or scaled back. This leads to a more disciplined organization, less waste, more focus, and ultimately better financial performance. We're also seeing a shift in hiring. Instead of building large teams quickly, companies are focusing on efficiency. They're looking for people who can have a high impact. They're investing in tools and technology that increase productivity, and they're expecting more output from smaller teams. This ties directly into the do more with less mindset. Because if profit is the priority, efficiency becomes essential. Another key change is in pricing. Companies are becoming more intentional about how they price their products and services. Instead of competing purely on price to drive volume, they're focusing on value. They're asking, what is this worth to the customer? And they're pricing accordingly. This often leads to higher prices, but also higher margins, which supports profitability. There's also a shift in customer strategy. Not all customers are equally valuable. Some generate consistent revenue and strong margins. Others are costly to acquire and serve. In the past, companies often chased volume, acquiring as many customers as possible. Now they're becoming more selective. They're focusing on high-value customers, building long-term relationships, increasing customer lifetime value. This reduces the need for a constant acquisition and improves profitability. Another important change is in product strategy. Companies are simplifying. They're cutting low-performing products, reducing complexity, focusing on what works. Because every product comes with costs: development, marketing, support, inventory, and if those costs outweigh the benefits, they hurt profitability. By narrowing their focus, companies can operate more efficiently, and that has a direct impact on the bottom line. There's also a broader cultural shift happening. Profitability is no longer seen as something that comes later, it's seen as something that must be built into the business from the start. This changes how decisions are made. Teams are more conscious of costs. Leaders are more focused on returns. Strategies are evaluated based on their financial impact. And that creates a different kind of organization, one that is disciplined, intentional, and sustainable. But here's the key idea. Growth hasn't disappeared, it's still important. But it's no longer the only goal, and it's no longer pursued at any cost. Instead, growth is being treated as a choice, a strategic decision, something that is pursued when it makes sense and scaled back when it doesn't. Profit, on the other hand, is non-negotiable, because without profit, a business can't sustain itself. It can't invest, it can't adapt, it can't survive long-term, and that's why this shift matters so much, because it changes the foundation of how businesses operate. It moves the focus from expansion to sustainability, from volume to value, from spending to discipline. And the companies that understand this shift are the ones gaining an edge. They're not just growing, they're growing efficiently. They're not just generating revenue, they're generating profit. And in today's environment, that's what sets them apart. So when you hear that growth is slowing down in certain industries, it doesn't necessarily mean businesses are struggling. It may mean they're changing, becoming more focused, more disciplined, more profitable. Because in the new business reality, growth is no longer the ultimate goal, profit is. And that's a fundamental shift that's reshaping the future of business.